Welcome to Our College, Your Voices. I'm your host, Kara Monroe. While I was visiting the Bloomington campus earlier this fall, Associate Professor of Psychology, Dr. Brad Thurmond, told me about a project he and colleague, Associate Professor of English and Communication, Christine Brandel, work together to present each year. That project is called the Human Library Project. Brad and Christine are joining me today to tell us a little bit more about this project, so I am excited to have you meet them. First up is Dr. Brad Thurmond. Hi, Brad.
Hi, Kara.
Hi, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Sure. As you mentioned, I teach psychology at the Bloomington campus. I've been with the college about 28 years. I was at the Kokomo campus, at the Wabash campus, came to Bloomington not quite 10 years ago, I guess, 8 or 9 years ago. So been with the college in a variety of positions, both faculty and administration.
Excellent. Good to have you, Brad. And Christine Brandel. Hi, Christine.
Hello. I teach English here in Bloomington. I'm also the advisor for our literary magazine, Root and Branch, and the advisor for the Campus Pride group. And this is my 10 years here at Ivy Tech Bloomington.
Congratulations.
Your celebration.
Wonderful. Well, congratulations to you. And Christine, you were the Bloomington campus's nominee for the Outstanding Faculty Member last year.
Yes, I was.
Yes, congratulations on that, too.
Thank you.
All right. So to both of you, I got to hear a little bit when we were together in Bloomington, Brad, from you, but I'd like both of you to weigh in. What is the Human Library Project?
Well, that's a great question. So we'll start with the basics. The Human Library Project is an international organization, and your listeners can check out humanlibrary.org for their website. I think the Human Library Project started almost 2 decades ago, 2001, I think. And the idea behind it was to model an interaction between people that follows, kind of uses the library as a metaphor. So in a library, you would pick a book, check the book out, read it, bring it back. With the Human Library, you pick a book, but the book is a person. And then rather than reading it, you have a conversation with the person. And so the idea behind it was to try to foster a sense of understanding and build empathy and try to address issues around bias and discrimination by allowing the readers to interact with somebody who's had a different experience from their own. And really the only qualification for being a book, other than wanting to be one, is that you've faced some experience of bias or discrimination and are willing to have a conversation about that. And so the Human Library Project event at the Bloomington campus, we just facilitate those conversations. We find people who want to volunteer to be books and share their stories and answer questions from patrons who come to the event. And then we publicize it, and students and employees and people from the community come and just spend a few hours having conversations with people who've had different life experiences.
Very good. How did the two of you get involved with this project?
Separately, we heard something about the Human Library Project on NPR one day, and I think I came in here and was just chatting, and I can't remember who mentioned it first, but just, did you hear about this cool idea? Yes, I did hear. And I do remember Brad being the one saying, what about, could we do this here? And we were both kind of like, if we do it together, let's give it a try.
Right. Well, and it's a simple concept, but it sounds like it's a ton of work to facilitate. Tell me a little bit about what goes into planning the day.
Well, first we have to find a day to do it. So, that's a challenge. We find a day. We're fortunate here in Bloomington to have a nice facility with Shreve Hall. And so we schedule it there. So we work around that schedule. And honestly, Christine and I try to think about our teaching schedules and to make sure that it works for us from that perspective. In the first years, we looked at student foot traffic to see what days of the week we had the most number of students on campus. And that has been Tuesdays and Wednesdays. So we've always scheduled it on a Tuesday or a Wednesday. And then we recruit books. That's gotten a little bit easier because we have people who return from year to year. But it's still a challenge, trying to find somebody who has had an experience. And for many of these people, these experiences are kind of emotionally difficult. Mm-hmm. So the person has to have not only had that experience, but be in a place where they're willing and able to talk about it.
Two strangers.
Right.
Good point. Two strangers. When we started, we just started thinking about categories or types of people or experiences, and then just started asking. We started asking colleagues and putting the call out and making connections to people out in the community. And the books that are going to be there this year, some of them have been with us for a few years. One in particular has been with us since the very first year we did it, and this will be our 4th year.
Excellent.
We have people from out in the community. There's a law enforcement officer who comes to talk about that experience. And so, we had a faculty member here whose husband is a retired law enforcement officer, so we had a connection there. We have some people who will be books who are students who've heard about the event in the past and were interested in that. So some of the books are employees who have heard about it and want to participate. So that part takes a little bit of work, recruiting people. And I would say we start that we hold the event in November, late November, and we start recruiting right at the beginning of the school year in August. Mm-hmm. So that takes some effort. The actual event itself, you need a space. You need a place for people to sit and have conversations. And that's really all you have to run the event. So one of the things that, when we heard about this years ago on NPR, one of the things that struck me was, oh gosh, this sounds like a great event, and it won't cost a bunch of money.
We do tend to love those kinds of events, don't we? So what are some of the benefits that you have seen from doing the Human Library Project?
There's a lot of different kinds of benefits. So I will say everyone who has been one of our books has found it really valuable. And that's the fact they keep coming back, right? And generally what they say is there's a personal benefit to being heard. But then they also feel like, I should clarify first, all books are explaining their experience.
Okay.
So not the experience of everyone, that all Jewish Americans. They are only speaking for themselves. Mm-hmm. But they do find value in, one of our books once said, it meant so much to me that people were interested in hearing my story, but that I think now if they'll feel less kind of afraid or judgmental of other people who might share a similar story.
Right.
And so it really is about breaking down stigma. And I think that's beneficial for the patrons as well as for the books.
Right.
As an English professor, I think it's also just great that people are communicating with each other and looking at each other, that exchanges aren't all virtual text speak, that it's really about, and what our conversations we limit them to about.
The way we run it is we start the conversation on the half hour. So the conversations last about 25 minutes, and then we ask them to wrap up, although they don't always
and
do it.
That gives people time to go deeper than just surface.
Right.
So if you've ever led a class discussion where you think, oh, I've got these 3 questions that are going to trigger discussion, and the answers are no, yes, never thought about it, and then it's silent, they've got the time to kind of go to dig deeper. And I think particularly now, where one of my class themes right now is fake news and the role of social media, and where things are so, they're broad is the non-judgmental word, but often, stereotypical or deliberately kind of harmful portrayals of groups, and to really just well, let me think about how to say this. It isn't that you stop seeing like a difference, but you see the full person. So it isn't, the goal isn't, pretend that there aren't these differences, because there are differences and differences matter. But to be able to see, it's not just this group, it's people with a different experience than mine. And to me, that's probably the biggest benefit.
Absolutely. Do you have a lot of classes that participate, or is it generally individuals that participate in terms of being patrons?
We've got a lot of both.
Okay, good.
Sometimes students are encouraged. Sometimes teachers bring their whole class down.
Right.
And other times people kind of, what's going on over there?
Yeah.
And a lot of times the students who have been told, go down, read one book.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I had to be here because my teacher said they're the first in line. Can I get to that table next? Can I talk to that one? And some people are there the entire time.
That's excellent.
And a number have said, I wish it was longer so I could talk to every book.
So Christine, that answer goes into the next question I want to ask, which is a little bit about some of the reactions and some of the stories that you have heard from folks in the past. What do people say about this event after they're there, both books and patrons?
Well, we've had a lot of professors get in touch to say specifically, the theme of my class, my World Lit class, is about identity. And so we came down as a class, and then we went back up to the classroom and we talked about how identity, that we've been talking about it in these stories, but how it exists in our world. In sociology classes, human services, there's a lot of classes where the concept in general can be beneficial, but then certain books may be really useful. We've been reading articles, but here's a person. We can talk to this person.
Your question about individuals versus classes. I had a colleague just this week who mentioned she has class during this time, and she's just going to spend the whole class period with her students at the Human Library Project. One of the things that some of the faculty do, I do this in my courses, is I have the students write a short reflective piece so that they, just a couple pages, just so they can, and I ask them to think about, what did you expect before you went to the event? So I ask them to jot some notes down about that, and then talk about one or more of the books and that conversation and what you learned and what you thought about it. And I was really surprised the first year that we did it, how strongly students felt about the event. I had students, I have had a couple students who have said things along the lines of, this is the best event I've been to ever at Ivy Tech, which is a pretty amazing thing. And students talking about it the next day in class, and are we going to do it again next semester? To which Christine and I always say no.
Once a year.
Once a year thing.
We need to get some other campuses doing it so that we have it going year round, but at different places.
Well, I do think that we were the first one in Bloomington, but the Monroe County Library, I think, now does one.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fantastic.
They have one next week. Last year, I think they came and just set up an information table our first or second year. And then I have friends at the public library in Kokomo, and I shared this with them, and they hold one now.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's cool. And if there are other Ivy Tech campuses that would want to do something like this, I'm more than happy to help them through the process. So.
Good. Wonderful. You talked a little bit about the storytelling aspect for the book. How much of that 25 to 30 minute time is storytelling versus how much of it is Q&A? Do you set any guidelines for the books, or just sort of let them go and do their thing?
Well, I talk to all the books before they first become a book. And the only expectation that we place on them, I really only cover a couple things. One is, at the start of the conversation, maybe take 2 minutes and introduce yourself and give the people at the table a little information about yourself. That kind of frames the conversation. And then I also make sure the books know that If the conversation goes in a direction in which you are not comfortable, you can say so. You can say, I'm not really here to talk about that, and redirect the conversation. To date, I've never had a single person say that's happened.
Right.
Honestly, the first year we did it, I think we were both a little concerned on how the conversations might go. We've not had any problems like that at all. People have been very respectful. Students really, it's not just students, but let's say participants, really lean into the conversations and are really interested. In fact, the one challenge we have is when we hit the end of the time period for a conversation, sometimes people don't want to get up and make room for the next group of people.
See that.
So it's really been a good experience, I think, for both the books and the participants.
You've both had the opportunity, I assume, to read and to talk to students about their participation. So I'm going to generalize students as patrons for just a second, just to get that perspective. Brad, you talked a little bit about it, but Christine, I'd love to know if you have anything to add about just what the student experience is, because I think these stories can be challenging for the book especially, but it may also open up feelings in the participant that they've either not explored before or they may be more comfortable exploring. Are there things that folks have brought forth out of that you think are enriching or helpful?
I do. I had an international student who, again, I encouraged them to go and write a little reflection, and just talked about, I never met anyone, and I didn't know. And at the end of his reflection, he talked a little bit about, it made me think about my identity. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's kind of twofold. I do think there is just a value in meeting people who are different or have had different life experiences. Right. But then I think there's an additional value of then kind of thinking about yourself in a different way and about your identity. And there are things that, we kind of think of, well, the way I am is like the normal way.
Right.
It's kind of like with accents. We don't hear our own accents.
Right.
This is just the way you talk. And if you sound different from me, you must have an accent.
Yep.
And so kind of just to think about themselves in a little bit of a different way. And to see different. We had a book her religion is not the kind of mainstream religion here. And she said to see people who have no idea about my religion except it's not theirs. Mm-hmm. So it must, it must. And she said that was fascinating and for her a little bit surprising at first. Yeah. But then to know that her contribution has kind of made a difference. Mm-hmm. There was real value in that.
Yeah, that's so cool. Just, I love the conversation about identity and exploring other people's identities from their perspective and not placing our judgment on them.
Right.
And using the time as an opportunity just to learn and to be curious and to cultivate that curiosity. So
there are lots of things that I think in the reflective writings that students have submitted to me that indicated they've learned from some books parts of other people's experiences that are just invisible to them. Mm-hmm. So, for example, one of the books that's been with us since the beginning is a transgender woman. Mm-hmm. And she's very, very open and willing to talk about her whole experience and so forth. And I have had students who were almost stunned is too strong a word, but like I had no idea what was involved with this. They were just absolutely went from no knowledge at all to just a sort of astounded at all the experiences and the things that this particular person has gone through and what that, just from a basis of really no factual information. And I think there's such value in that. It really does. It's another element that makes a person step back and think about their own experience and maybe, and this is my hope, maybe the next time they encounter someone who has had a different experience from their own, they might not immediately jump to conclusions. They might think, well, maybe that person, maybe I need to listen first.
Well, and the listening ties into what you said about that curiosity. You know, that I think sometimes curiosity, we are afraid to be curious. And so we don't want to say, I don't know what that's like. What's it like? And a lot of that is, you know, comes from a good place. We don't want to seem rude or nosy. And this is a safe place to be curious.
Yeah, good point.
I love that. We talked a little bit about what goes on in doing this event. If somebody else wanted to do it on their campus, anything else they should think about as they're doing that? You've talked a lot about recruiting books and the event, but anything else they should be thinking about?
Start early. You know, I'm perfectly happy to. I have spoken with a few other Ivy Tech employees about this. People have had some interest. I think the simple thing to do is just send me an email, and we're happy to share the materials we've developed. If we could work the schedule out, I'm willing to travel to another campus to spend a little time talking about how to do it and what we've done. We've really honestly kind of modified the Human Library Project. In its initial inception, it was one book and one patron having a conversation. We didn't have really the facility or way to do that, and with at times 30 or 40 people walking in all at once wasn't really very practical. So we actually have small group conversations. But I'm happy to talk through how you do that. You need space, and you need a team of people who are willing to do some recruiting, and you need to start early because the recruiting takes more time than you'd think. And Christine and I have worked on developing print materials we use on the day of the event that make the thing go much smoother. Gosh, last year was a whole bunch better than the first year.
Yeah. We are happy to share because it's a lot of people moving about. And between years 1 and 2, we made some big changes, and our marketing department has been great in developing kind of what helps us to keep things organized. I think one other thing is we do have some librarians. We really work the metaphor. I work at the what do we call the
checkout desk.
The checkout desk.
Okay.
But we have some librarians who kind of circulate, and I feel like there's never been an issue, but I like their presence there.
Makes sense. Books
and patrons know if there's an issue, they'll have a librarian over there. Also, if it gets a little jumbled or chaotic, there's somebody to guide them. Yeah, so we'd be happy to share.
Yeah. Okay. And I don't want to scare anybody off. We haven't had any. I mean, the most difficult thing we've had to deal with as one of our librarians is bringing a box of Kleenex to a table.
Sure.
I mean, it really isn't that bad. And we do provide like a little bit of a hospitality room for the books, so they can scoot out and get a bite to eat or something to drink.
And take a break.
Take a little break. Yeah. 3 hours is a long time to talk, even if it's about something you know. So
absolutely. Well, I know the Bloomington event is coming up in November. If somebody wanted to attend, can they do that?
Absolutely. Wednesday, November 20th.
Okay.
We start at 11 o'clock, and the last conversation wraps up at 2. So that means the last conversation starts at 1:30.
Okay.
It's in Shreve Hall on the Bloomington campus. There's no, you don't need to reserve a spot. Just show up, and we'll work you into a conversation. We're happy to have anybody that's interested.
And I'll put all that detail in the show notes too, so that folks have that. This is a wonderful project, and I love that you two took the time to chat with me about it. Is there anything else that you just want to share from your experience of doing it to make sure that folks are just aware, or other important points that my questions missed today?
Well, I want to thank you for, when we chit-chatted a few weeks ago about this, you jumped right on the idea of having this as part of the podcast, and I really appreciate having an opportunity to talk about it. This is a really important project for the two of us, and we do have a handful of colleagues who help us out on the day of the event, but This is basically our show.
It's our baby,
Yeah.
and it really means a lot.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I love to talk about and promote projects that are going on our campus that our faculty are leading. So thank you to both of you for doing this and for enduring. We did have to reschedule this one, so appreciate you both being so willing to do that. Thank you to both of you. Every episode ends with a call to action. For this episode, I would encourage you to check out the Human Library Project website. That's at www.humanlibrary.org. And if you can get to Bloomington on November 20th from 11 to 2, take part in the Human Library Project. We would love to hear from you if you do take part in that and hear about your experience. Again, I'll put all of those details in the show notes. I want to thank you again for joining this episode of Our College, Your Voices. Again, huge thanks to Brad and to Christine for participating today and for talking about this project and for all the work that they put in throughout the year to make this happen. I'm your host, Kara Monroe. You can connect with me, as always, on Twitter at KNM Tweets. This is the very last episode being produced by our producer, Ann Penny Valentine. Ann will continue on Twitter at Indy Penny, but Ann is leaving the Ivy Tech family and taking another wonderful job here in the Indianapolis community, and I just appreciate all the work she's done to be my partner in this effort. Ivy Tech employees, don't forget, you can join our Microsoft Teams community. Details on that are in our show notes. You can reach us by email at ourcollegeyourvoices@ivytech.edu. Leave us a voicemail at 317-572-5049. Our website is ivytech.edu/podcast. Production assistance for this and every episode is provided by Becky Campbell, Sarah DeWitt, and the Ivy Tech Community College Marketing Team. And our podcast concept is by Matthew Pittman. Theme music, recording, and post-production services provided by the incredible Jen Eads, the Brassy Broadcasting Company. And we will talk to you next time on Our College, Your Voices.